I hate to break our mood, Nick, but I think we have a pushy lady that wants to come into the chat.
There's always one.
There's always one.
And she's
Miss
bound to be
Shorty.
far better looking. Oh my goodness.
She's way better looking than both of us. Even
She's
her
way
picture.
better looking than us too. So let's
Give
bring
her
her on.
logo's even better looking than we are.
Can we have a threesome? Is that allowed? Or do I have to go off for her to come in?
Oh, no, we're all here. Hi, boys. What's doing?
Talk amongst yourselves. I'm embarrassed now.
I've obviously missed what's been going on the last couple of weeks here.
Well, there's nothing going on.
No,
but I have a ghost.
Going on.
I have a ghost story, not a ghost story, but I have a first-hand experience, maybe similar to Nick's, but not, but very, very real. If you want to hear it.
If you want to share it, share
it.
Of course I want to share it.
I've got me. Let me get me popcorn out.
Yes, you know I can talk, Nick. So like I've got to set the scene, and so no one needs to be going, oh my god, I'm so sorry, Shorty. But anyway, so my husband passed away very suddenly. Wait, why? Hang on, I'm getting feedback. Have you got? Am I echoing?
No, I can hear
you. I'm not echoing for you guys.
Not for me.
Okay, good. I'll deal with it. Adam, you can sort me out with my sound, I'm sure.
I got you.
So anyway,
I think I got you.
Tell me when I'm good. There, I'm good. Yes. Oh, am I good?
You are now.
Okay, sweet. So
I got you both.
So we had a home. It was an old home, and we started renovating it. And he'd been getting really, really bad headaches for I don't even know, 12 months. Bad. I didn't know how bad they were. Anyway, so one Friday night, we just come off a week. He'd had a week off work. He was a landscaper and like a garden care person, and we'd had a week off over Christmas. So it was early January, and anyway, so it was a Friday night, and he'd just gone back to work that very day, right, with his brother who worked with him, and he went into the bathroom to get the toothbrushes ready, so like such a well-trained husband. He was putting the toothpaste on the toothbrushes. I was probably like stoned out of my brains. Well, yes, I was, and sitting in my chair on the couch, ready to go in with my toothbrushes ready, like the true princess that I am, and brush my teeth. And suddenly I could hear in the bathroom a whole bunch of crashing and banging, like kind of like plastic noise. I'm like, what the fuck is that? So I raced into the bathroom, and he was there in the bathroom having, actually, and trigger warning, like a grand mal seizure. Like he was in full seizure mode. He was on the floor in the bathroom. He'd ripped the toilet off the footings. He'd ripped the basin off the footings, and he's in a couple of moments between me hearing those noises and going in there. And anyway, so he ended up having I called the ambulance after. Trauma does weird things. I didn't even call the ambulance first. I called his brother first, who was had been living with us and was his co-worker. He was working for Robert, and said, what should I do? And he was like call the fucking ambulance, you weirdo. So I called the ambulance. Anyway, so he was in hospital that was a Friday night, like about 11 o'clock at night, and he was in hospital for the weekend. On the Saturday, he was in a coma, like in intensive care, completely in a coma. They did scans and found out that he had medically it's termed as a giant aneurysm. So in his brain, when they did the scans for his brain, we didn't know about it at all, but the scans showed, basically, if you pictured a fried egg or a poached egg, the aneurysm inside his brain was about the size of a yolk. Like it was medically what's called a giant aneurysm. He shouldn't have been.
Cow.
So on the Sunday, on the Saturday he was in a coma, completely like unconscious, out. On the Sunday he was awake and he was talking, and the prognosis wasn't good. I could tell that. and we lived in Newcastle, which is like a small city in New South Wales, about 2 hours north of Sydney. But the best, like brain surgeons are in Sydney, obviously, in major capital cities. So he wanted to go home. He was a mad stoner, and he was like, "Why can't I just go home and smoke some cones and watch the cricket?" This was in January of 2003. So obviously that wasn't a thing, but so there was no going home. There was no turning back. And on the Monday, he was scheduled to be transported by ambulance to Sydney, so a 2-hour drive south to Sydney for brain surgery with actually the best brain surgeon in Australia. And we got to Sydney, and I won't trigger you all with the trauma shit, but anyway. In surgery, he actually ended up passing away. So it was far too late. He should have, if he can, aneurysms are actually quite survivable if you catch them in time. But he had been not being honest with himself or me about the severity of his headaches. Anyway, so he did pass away. And so that was the Monday. So in the week between him passing away and his funeral and burial, which was on the Friday that week. So anyway, that all happened. I had to tell that part of the story because it's relevant to my paranormal or my ghost story, for one of a less kind of I mean, anyway, so obviously I had to go back there. I was in Sydney, and my father and his sister and his father came to the hospital. His mother was overseas. We were sorry, rewind. So when he went into surgery, we all said goodbye to him. When you go into like theatre, particularly for emergency surgery, there is a thing called a red line. So basically, once you get to that red line, after that, it's a completely sterile area, right? So nobody can go past. So we all send out, like he was already on his way going, but the three of us, like sent our, said goodbye to him there, like ready for surgery, and then we all went to sit into the waiting room, and we were sitting there, and I don't know what time it was, but the hospital staff kept coming in and saying, it's fine, it's going to be a while. Why don't you go? Why don't you go and get something to eat? So it was sort of, by then it was 6 p.m. And it would have been a long day, obviously, a long weekend. So they sent us over to the cafeteria to get some food, and obviously none of us were hungry, but we walked across like the footbridge over the road, like a glassed in tunnel over the road, and went to the cafeteria, and we were just sort of standing there ready to order. And then next minute, the pastor, like the religious person for the hospital, comes like scurrying across towards us. Yeah, the chaplain, thank you, and said, you need to come back. And Robert's father and his sister said, why, what's happening, is there news? And I looked at them and I said, she can't tell us this news, like she can't tell us. So we of course walked back across, and instead of being in the waiting room, sorry, rewind. So before they sent us off to get food, sorry, trauma. Before they sent us off to get food, we were sitting in the actual waiting room, like with all the other people waiting for their loved ones. And Kate, who was 10 years younger than Robert, his sister, and I was sitting next to each other, and we were just both sitting there. So it must have been closer to 7. We were sitting there, and suddenly I felt this, and I can still remember the sensation. I felt this feeling of, from my heart into the pit of my stomach, like a flutter. Like neither of you, I presume, have been pregnant, but a bit like the feeling of when the baby first starts to move, but a stronger feeling. From my heart down into my chest, down into the pit of my stomach, then come all the way back up, visceral, all the way back up through my chest, up through like kind of like my throat chakra, up and out. And I lifted my head and looked towards the window, and there was like a little shitty hospital window, and I looked towards the window. And then Kate, his sister, looked at me and she said, "Did you feel that?" And I said, "What?" And she goes, "Did you feel that?" And I'm like, "Well, fuck yeah, I felt that." And we just kind of looked at each other, but I was 27 and she was 20, she was 17. So, and I was like, "Oh," okay. And then they sent us over to get food. Okay. So, and then the chaplain came in. Sorry, I told the story terribly, but anyway, it's been a while since I've told it. So we're going back, and instead of being in the waiting room, they called us back into the like a special room, and they were
Right, they
sitting.
take you into like a private room.
Yeah, private room,
Yeah.
and Catherine and Mervyn, so Robert's father, were like, well, "What's going on? What's going on?" What I was saying to them,
You knew?
honestly, I knew, and Kate knew too,
Yeah.
but she was too young, and then they came in and told us the news, and the whole hospital staff came in, and they were all crying. Both the surgeons were crying, all the nursing staff were crying, and I have a tattoo on my hand, which some of you might have seen in my lives, which is a clock face on my left hand, and the clock face reads 6:57, and that was the exact time that Catherine and I felt that, both of us
Oh,
at the same time,
wow.
the butterfly feeling from our heart to our stomach, and then back out and up, and we looked up, and both of us lifted our heads, and that was 6:57.
Wow.
So that was one thing. So I can remember, it was 21 years ago, and I can still remember it clear as day. So that's one part, and
Hold on,
before
Nick.
that,
Hold on.
sorry, yes, go.
I'm gonna so I'm gonna Nick wants to say something. I have him muted because that's where the echo's coming from.
Okay,
So
yep.
Shorty, let him talk before you reply.
Yes,
Let him finish
because I
before
have
you
more
reply.
to it. There's more to this story, but yes.
Okay, cool. I want to give him a chance to jump in. Go ahead, bud.
Well, the only thing I was going to ask, because it might be lead on to what Shorty's going to say anyway, have you felt anything like that from him since?
Well, Nick, I'm glad you asked.
Okay, I'm gonna mute you now, Nick. Hold on. So Nick, if you have something to say, just lift your finger up. Okay, I'll be
Not
watching.
the bird, though.
Yeah.
So
Here we go.
so anyway, so I went back to our home that we purchased when we were both 21, and I was pregnant with our daughter Sammy. She's now 26, and where he had that first seizure, where he basically, like, he did start to die there. That was the beginning of the end. And in the week between, well, not week, 5 days between when he passed away on the Monday and he was buried on the Friday. Obviously, I was tasked with choosing, like, I wrote a poem for his eulogy for his funeral. I'd never been to a funeral before, Adam or Nick. I'd never been able to too confronting. I'm such a I know now, but I didn't know then, but I am far too much of an empath to deal with the energies in a funeral. I just could never. So I don't remember when it was in that week, but probably maybe night 2 or night 3. So like Wednesday or Tuesday or Wednesday night. No, actually sorry, wait. It was in the day, and it was summer. So in Australia, it is in Newcastle, very hot, and it was a particularly hot period of time. It was like a proper heat wave, and I think we were getting like 37, 38 degrees Celsius, which is about 95 to 100 Fahrenheit, very hot. So summer, and we didn't have air conditioning. It was an old place. And I went into the bathroom one day in the daytime to, I don't know, wash my hands or something, whatever, maybe go to the toilet. And so it's boiling hot, middle of the day. And I was in that same bathroom where he had his first seizure. And suddenly on my arm, my right arm, and so sorry, rewind. When he was having the seizure, I went into him, and as I went into him and didn't know what was going on, it was just so confronting. He in grand mal seizures, you clench and release your hands, everything like flexes and releases. It's all pure reaction as the brain goes through these gigantic epic seizures. And as I reached down to him to say what's going on, he grabbed into back of my hair in my head, and no cognitive, it wasn't intentional, it was just a reflex. And actually it took me about, I mean, it felt like forever, but it was probably 10 or 15 seconds tops. It might have been 5, but like grabbed onto the back of my hair at the base of my head, and there was clumps of my own hair all over the bathroom afterwards, and I felt like I'd been in a car accident, whiplash. It was so strong. The seizures were so strong. So anyway, that was the bathroom, and I went into that one day midway through that 5-day period, and at middle of the day, and suddenly as I walked in there, suddenly on my arm, my bare arm, and I had this across my forearm on my right arm on a slight diagonal. Suddenly there was a hand on my arm, and my hairs on my arm, and I have blonde hairs because I'm naturally blonde. I know, lol. But I had my blonde hairs on my arms in that spot, in about a 2.5, 3 inch sort of strip on my arm on a diagonal, all went up in goosebumps. And I looked down at it, and I touched my arm, and I brushed my hairs on my arms there to try and like stroke it away, and they wouldn't go away. And I was like, and so I just looked at there, and I was just like, okay, well, hello, Robert. And okay.
Yeah.
And I brushed them again, and it was so hot. It wasn't goosebumps. It wasn't anything. So I think there was, everything. My whole world was upside down. So that wasn't. I just accepted it, and then so that was one thing. And then because he was having a funeral, and his family were devout Catholics, well, his mother. So the funeral itself was devout Catholic, and sidebar, at his funeral, like you will never find another human on this planet he was the best man you have ever met. You will never find another human who will say a bad word. There were at least 1,500, maybe close to 2,000 people in that at his funeral. The church was not even standing room only. It was all out onto the street. It was out onto the street. There was one of his friends was a police officer and was standing out on the street just to direct the traffic around. The guest sign-in book that we had, that was full. There was no room in the margins, and that was like a 1,200 sort of name spot. So he was the best man ever. But so the funeral was very much designed for his family. It was very traditional. But then his burial, I wanted, and I asserted myself on this, that because he was a Southern Californian punk rocker. Like that's the music we listened to. Lagwagon, No Effects, No Use for a Name, Bad Religion. That was our music back then. So for his burial, I wanted to have something very Robert, because he wasn't Catholic. He had rebelled against that. So I said I would choose music for his burial, and I chose some of his favorite songs. And again, middle of the day, summer, and I was sitting I was a stoner then, but this is not a stoner thing, because I was a full-time functioning cones all day, every day, all night, every day, all night, every night person. But this wasn't a stone thing. And I was sitting in my chair, which is where I'd been sitting when he went in to prepare the toothbrushes for the night. And I was sitting there, and I probably had it was 21 years ago. I feel like I had my Walkman on, with maybe a Discman with ear headphones on. But I was sitting there, and I was listening and choosing, and I was just like really feeling his vibe through the music, because it was so much of a part of him, such a part of him. And I had my eyes closed and listening to the music and selecting, I don't know, maybe 3 songs, I can't remember now. And I looked up to my left over, we had this big wide open space in the renovated, partially, we hadn't finished doing it yet, but renovated area in the living area, kitchen area, dining area, that we'd knocked walls out for. And I looked up, and there he was. Robert danced. He had long hair, the most luscious locks.
And you saw him.
Oh, he was there. He was there. He was dancing like Robert danced, and he was appreciating the music that I was choosing for him. And again, I just took that in my stride. And then on the funeral day, which was a Friday, when the funeral had happened, and I went to my first ever funeral, and I gave a eulogy, and I wrote a poem, but I didn't. Everyone else, like his mother, oh my God, his mother was just there wailing, chilling, and everybody was in black. And I remember looking out, and there was one boy, because I was a McDonald's manager, and there was one boy who went to the same private school as Robert, but was in a couple of years younger, and was also a family friend. And he had this beautiful maroon, almost red wine, port wine colored shirt on. I remember looking out at him, but everybody was just so like Robert. he was just the epitome of vibrancy and like forever living. He would have lived forever. He had plans to go from being Robert to being Rob to being Bob to being Bert. Like he had his whole life planned out, and it just didn't happen. 27, yeah. Anyway, so I gave a eulogy, and I basically, because nobody knew what had happened because it was so out of the blue. So I basically did like standard Lisa, standard Shorty, community service. Told everybody who was so in such shock and grief and confusion about what had happened. I just laid it out for them. I told them everything that had happened for the last few months, and then the weeks, and then the days of, and then and so they could have that peace with, because it was just so awful. Anyway, so when we were driving from the church, the Catholic church, which is the church we got married in, and actually we walked out of the church. We walked in when we walked into the church when we got married. We had the song From This Moment. Anyway, a Shania Twain song. Don't quote me on because I got it wrong. And we walked out to the Pachelbel Canon, right? So I don't know if you're familiar, but it's a piece of classical music. At his funeral, I made sure, and we had a family friend who sang at our wedding, and she couldn't sing again at the funeral. She was too grief stricken. But I had everybody, as everyone was entering the funeral, come into the Pachelbel Canon, and then we all left to the song we'd walked into, the Shania Twain song we walked into. It was From This Moment, and then we were so on the way to the cemetery. Surreal, you can't make this shit up, but I was sitting there, and I feel like it was maybe a limousine or a hire car, but maybe it wasn't. I don't know, trauma. And it was about a 25-minute drive from the church to the cemetery, and it was the whole week was the most windy week, which, Nick, you know I hate wind. I can't do wind, and I never could really do wind. But the week between Robert dying and his burial was some of the windiest times in Newcastle in that time. So that's the reason why I really can't do wind. And by the way, the wind abated as soon as he was buried. But as we were driving to the cemetery, there was this flock of pelicans, which, you know, you might see a pelican occasionally, usually like in sort of a riverina, like, you know, a pelican here and there. But there was this flock of maybe 7 or 8 pelicans, and they flew with us the whole way. I'm not even joking, from the church in Merriweather, which is beachside but suburbia, all the way through, and with the basically like in formation by the car up in the sky until we got to the cemetery, and then they flew off. So yeah, that's
I think when, you know, it sounds like that was the love of your life, and that's a
we were high school sweethearts.
that's a very special bond. So I'm not surprised. Like, I'm sure he's going to be with you forever in a way.
He is. He still comes to me often. Like not often, but when he comes to me in my dreams, he's there. It's not in my dreams. He's to me. But we were high school sweethearts. We were best friends in high school.
Oh yeah.
And he got sent off to boarding school because his parents believed that he was just the worst kid. He was actually one of the most nerdy, like well-behaved children ever. It was young teenagers. He got sent off to boarding school and was there full time. And about 6 months later, when I wanted to go to boarding school, so both of us were going to boarding school in Sydney, and occasionally we would see each other when we were on the train, catching the train back on Friday night to Newcastle, and we used to like see each other. We always had a little crush. When he was at boarding school and before I went, he used to write me letters, and one of our good friends kept those letters. I don't know where they are now. She did give them to me, but they've gone by the wayside. And we never hooked up, and then we parted ways a little bit from about the age of 16, 17, and just, you know, teenagers doing teenager shit. And then when we were 19, we ran into each other at a December what was called in Newcastle before liquor licensing laws had really cracked down. It was called the Santa Claus pub crawl in Newcastle, and it was just this most revolting, all in, everybody, like thousands, throngs of 18, 19, because that's the legal and drinking age in Australia, 19, 20-year-olds going from pub to pub for about a 3-kilometre stretch and just getting paro. My best friend at the time and I had this goal to see which of us could pash the most number of guys, kiss the most number of guys that night. I was up to number 3, baby. We had Mickey Mouse ears on. We were fucking killing it, yeah. And then suddenly I saw Robbie Bobby. We used to call him Robbie Bobby. And we saw each other. We pashed. I've got photos of someone who I met later who was a photography student who took photos of us. She didn't know either of us. It was just she was doing an assignment. Photos I've got a slide, like an old school, like a slideshow slide of it. And we were inseparable after that. We were 19 then. We had our daughter when we were 21. We bought a house. So yeah, no, that he was. So,
I get it.
Anyway,
I'm gonna have Nick wants to come on, say one more thing, and then I'm gonna kick you guys out so we can finish this thing.
Yes. Sorry, I
Right,
didn't.
hold on, brother.
Once again, Lisa hijacks. Sorry.
No, you're fine. No, this is a call-in. This is what it's about.
I can't think of anybody I'd rather be hijacked by, quite frankly. I think Adam feels the same.
Yeah.
Listen, the thing, and that was a lovely story, and I'm so glad that he's still with you, and he is still with you.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he still comes back to visit you in dreams, and that is him visiting you.
Yes.
Honestly, I'm married to a medium, guys. I know, I hear a lot of stuff. And that is exactly what is happening there.
Oh, yeah.
Now, and it always makes me think that you think about us as individuals, how much energy we have inside us. And I'm not talking about physical energy to go to the gym or something like that. Just think about us, what makes us up. You're not telling me, where does that go? It has to go somewhere. It can't just, the soul has to go somewhere, in my opinion. So where does it go? And so we have this debate about religion or reincarnation or whatever it is you believe in. But I am utterly convinced that something happens to us as individuals, that energy, that soul. And I do believe the body is a shell, which we just get, we don't need it any, it lasts a finite amount of time.
We go on.
Well, it goes on. But by the way, I am not religious in any way. I'm not, well, certainly not organized religion. I'm probably spiritual, I would say. Yeah. But it has to go somewhere. It has to go somewhere. And I promise you, Lisa, Robert is, you know where he is? He's just there.
Yeah,
just
of course.
Right fucking there.
Absolutely.
All the time. He's just there. He's with you.
Yes.
And sometimes he'll really step into your ether, and sometimes he'll be just the other side. But they are just there. I promise you, they are just there. I've seen and heard too much from my wife's business over the years to not know. And I know if I come home and there's incense burning, I know she's had a fucking heavy day. Because she's, whether it's a Holocaust victim or someone that's died of suicide or someone that's come through, because that's always the cue to, we've got to get the energy out of the house. Yeah. So they are there. I promise you, they are there.
Yeah, I don't need promising.
Right there.
I know wholeheartedly. I have no doubt. And just to call back, a bit of a callback to the Santa comments, Adam, don't even blame.
I know Santa's real. Santa's real. I know.
Santa is real. Fairies are real.
I saw him.
I know. I believe in Santa. I have no shame in saying it. I'm not being ironic. I'm not being silly. Santa is real. Adam's, Santa is real. It's all real. If you don't believe in those things, then I'm sad for people who don't believe in that, because that's just being jaded. And yeah.
I agree. All right, we're gonna move. I'm gonna boot you both out. Thank you guys both. Nick, dude, thank you for coming on, man. First time.
Pleasure.
I'm video, not afraid. Brought a great story.
No, well, honored to be part of your show,
dude.
That's all I can say. Honored to be on with you two superstars.
First time caller, long time listener, Nick. First time caller, long time listener. Yeah, at least 3.
I've been lurking for literally days.
Bye. Mwah. Love you.
Bye, you
Bye-bye.
guys. Bye.
Bye bye.